Hello Africa fans! Recently I travelled to the West Country to interview Brian Jackman. Brian has over 30 years experience writing for the Sunday Times and today also writes for the Daily Telegraph. I asked him to share his opinions on conservation in Botswana. Where in your opinion is the best place in Botswana to see lions in action?
To see them in action? Oh,
yeah,
I think probably you've got to go to Duba Plains, I suppose. It's a place which I've had the most exciting lion encounters. There's huge numbers of buffalo there, and you have this extraordinary setup of basically lions versus buffaloes, and produces some pretty exciting game watching.
Whereabouts is Duba Plains?
Duba Plains is right deep out in the Okavango Delta, about as far in as you can go. It's a lovely, remote, very wet habitat. If you're a lion junkie like me, it's a very good place to go. As a complete contrast, I also love the Central Kalahari Game Reserve.
Right.
It's about the size of Arizona, and it's a completely different habitat. Far fewer lions there, but the ones there are, you get good lions here. They are big black maned Kalahari.
And of course,
lions.
there's no grass in the way there, is
well,
there?
but you have to work hard to find them, and that's part of the fun, I think. And you need to go in the green season, when it's been raining, half a dozen huge apocalyptic thunderstorms, and they transform the Kalahari into this wonderful emerald desert, if you like.
Oh, wow.
And it's a stunning time to be there, a stunning place to visit, and it has the bonus of these magnificent lions if you're lucky enough to track them down places like Deception Valley. The Okavango, it's a kind of jigsaw of concessions.
All divided up.
All divided up. Yeah. And when you're in each one seems like the size of a small country when you're in it. There's very few. It has the benefit of, it's this wonderful scheme that the Botswana government has come up. They've gone for the sort of top end of tourism, and it has so many benefits.
Yeah. What role do private conservancies play in wildlife conservation in Botswana? Are these conservancies generally, broadly speaking, are they a good thing for the wildlife?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't really think you can have mass tourism and conservation. They just don't go together. And
as you mentioned, the Botswana government has had a policy for quite a few years now of pursuing this sort of high-end, low-volume, expensive holidays.
That's exactly the road they've gone down, with terrific results.
So actually, you think that is a good model for the long-term survival?
I do. Yeah, I believe it. I believe it's made Botswana a fantastic destination and a fantastic refuge for endangered species.
And why do you think that is? Is it just sort of less people visiting, less tourists to disturb the wildlife?
Partly. I mean, I think it's for a start, Botswana's a big country with a population of the human population. What is it? 2 million.
It's 2.2.
Very, very, very low.
Yeah.
And so there is room for wildlife and room for large numbers of elephants. Elephants need space and not too many people around. And most of those 2 million people are down to the south, around Gaborone.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win situation.
What do you think the tourism industry does to help conservations, if anything?
Well, it's this thing that the saying, if it pays, it stays. I mean, that says it all. And it's that to conscientious ecotourism is as long as if it's sustainable, you can just make the whole thing pay, and then there's no reason why would you want to get rid of the wildlife when it's bringing in so much money and employing so many people, and it can just roll on forever. It's unlike hunting. You have a trophy lion, you shoot it, it's gone, and one guy has the pleasure. If that lion is there for several years of its life, attracting so it's used.
It's
if you
earning
like,
money
and
repeatedly.
all throughout its life. I mean, up
Yeah.
in Kenya years ago, Richard Leakey called his lions the great unpaid workers for the Kenyan economy.
Yeah.
Said they're working round the clock for us, they're making millions, which is true, and it's the same, of course, happens in Botswana.
Yeah, well, yes, it's more exciting than Madame Tussauds or something,
It's a lot
isn't it,
more
in London?
exciting.
Thinking about protecting the wildlife in the country, obviously there's all sorts of problems with poaching, and it's
Yeah.
a very terrible and serious issue throughout Africa. Do you think poaching can ever be beaten, or at least contained in Botswana, or are the problems faced just too great for a single nation to tackle?
No, I think it can be, if the will is there, it can be contained, and at the moment the will is there. If the government are serious about conserving wildlife, which they seem to be, and always have done, and I think that the future is probably better for Botswana than many of the other, if not all the other wildlife destination countries in Africa. I think they in many ways it holds out the best hope.
Well, that's very positive. Of course, in February 2014, Botswana was one of 4 African nations to pledge to honour a 10-year moratorium on the trade of ivory.
Yes,
didn't they?
yes.
Which, meaning, of course, that they won't sell any of their
Yes.
ivory stocks on the open market. Do you think that's a positive move for conservation in Botswana? Because obviously ivory, it's a very valuable commodity, isn't it? But,
Well, yes, yes.
don't you think they'd be better to just destroy all
Yeah,
of
I
their
do.
ivory stocks?
I would do what President Moi did, in Kenya, is he just burned it.
Burnt it all, yeah.
Ivory is what rich people buy and nobody needs,
Mm.
and that's something that Ian Douglas Hamilton made that comment years ago, and it stands. It's true now as it was then. You don't need ivory. It's just if it's there, it's this terrible temptation that ends up in people dying. Poachers die, and people trying to defend the wildlife, they get killed as well. And for what? It's years ago there was a marvellous film called Bloody Ivory, made about the life of a Kenyan game warden, David Sheldrick, and that's what it is. There's blood in its hands, and I think, but just before the ivory trade was banned back at the end of the 1980s, I think it was said that 95% of all ivory in trade was illegal.
Really?
In other words, it was poached. So if there is any kind of legal trade, it's just a conduit which disguises the illegal trade going on behind it. So burn it. That's what I feel strongly about this.
Right.
And I've for years, working at the Sunday Times, I reported on these sort of ivory wars, and it's not very nice to see elephants with their faces chopped off and their tusks taken out, and it's not very nice to have people firing AK-47s at you. And people sending. There was one occasion in my life when a hit squad was sent to London to bump me off for trying to expose an African ivory poaching story. So
really?
there's
they're very serious people.
A lot of bad people out there involved in this dirty business.
Because I mean, it has a street value which is worth per kilogram more than cocaine. Not that I have first-hand knowledge.
And then you move on to rhino horns, which are literally worth more than their weight in gold. There's huge incentive. And in a sense, you can't blame the poor little guy in the bush, the poacher, who takes all the risk. Having said that, you really have to bear down on them, because if these were people breaking into Bank of London bank vaults and they were caught in the act, they'd be gunned down.
Face the
and so there's no
consequences,
difference in my view.
Yeah.
It's not poaching a pheasant for the pot. You have sort of romantic views of what poaching is all about.
It's
This
irreplaceable,
is serious. And when the rhino, this wonderful old dinosaur that's walked the earth for millions of years, when it's gone, it's gone. You cannot bring it back. And I think that's the greatest crime in the book, is the crime of extinction. So I feel quite passionate, quite strongly about that. And I'm very pleased to see, how well Botswana comes out of this. They've gone to huge lengths to protect their wildlife. I think Botswana is one of only 7 countries in Africa with more than 1,000 lions.
Really?
I think in the Okavango they've got about 1,500 lions.
And are those numbers increasing, or?
I think I think they probably are going to now, because Botswana has now, there's been a hunting ban imposed.
Right.
You can't shoot a trophy lion anymore, and that was causing huge problems.
Mm.
Because even if you shoot one male lion, the repercussions going through all the pride hierarchies, another male lions will come in, they'll kill the cubs.
Mm.
So it's not just killing one lion, there's a ripple effect that goes right down through the society.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that those numbers now, I would like to think they will actually increase, which would be tremendous.
Mm. And on that note, do you think that the natural environment and the wildlife of Botswana has a positive future? Say in 15 years' time, what sort of state do you think the country's wildlife will be in?
I think that whatever happens across the rest of Africa, Botswana probably holds out the greatest hope for the wildlife of the continent.
Really?
Yeah, that's what that would be my
that's
view.
very positive indeed,
Yeah.
then, eh?
But having said that, I mean, doesn't mean to say that it's risk-free and that people are not going to take it for granted, or that will not have to fight to maintain the status quo. They've got to, you've got to put your shoulder to the wheel and fight for every last inch. It's so precious.
Yeah, sure. Oh, well, thank you very much for your time, Brian Jackman.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Africa. Thank you.